Welcome back, everybody. In this video, I'm going to introduce the rest and spread operators in JavaScript through a bunch of different examples that show how it can be used in different and potentially interesting ways. So, this video won't necessarily be about whether or not you should use it, just how you can. So, starting off, this example does not currently use the rest or spread operator. This is going to introduce it. So we have a nums array. We have a letters array. These are the same length. I have an array called rs with nums and letters inside of it. And then I've created this little function called zip. And it takes two arrays. So r1 and r2 are what they will be named once they're inside of the function. It just maps over r1. And for every item in r1, it pairs it with that same, the item of the same index in r2. So here it would be 1 would be paired with A, 2 with B, 3 with C, and so on, so that they're all paired up. And as you can see down here, I just call zip, pass in nums as the first array, and letters as the second. So if I run this, then we get that. We get them all paired up together. Now, the basic way that the spread operator works is it allows you to take an array and spread it into its elements. So if I go rs here, this is going to spread the elements of rs, so nums and letters, into its specific values or into its distinct values. So it will behave exactly as it did before. See? And that's basically all it does as far as the spread operator goes. You can use it in a few different places, and you can use the rest operator in a few different places. We'll be covering those in the examples below. So let me just comment this guy out. That's the basics. Let's move on. So this here shows you, instead of this just the spread operator, it's also using the rest operator. So you'll notice that the spread operator is taking a argument and spreading it, and this takes a parameter or a number of parameters and gathers them together. So let's put this back to being what it should be instead of an empty array. That was me testing an edge case. Nums. So here, what I'm doing is instead of passing in the nums array, which would look like this, oops, if I could type, etc., etc. Instead, we're passing in, like that, the individual values. And so what this function does is just return the first value in the array if the array has at least one value. Otherwise, it returns null. And what you're getting in the parameter list is the use of the rest operator. And what this does is something very cool, which allows you to name any of the arguments that you want to use. So we've got X, you could do Y, you could do Z, however many you want out of the incoming arguments. And then you can use the rest operator to just gather all the rest of them up, hence rest, into an array. So here we have whatever the first item in the nums array is, which will be 1, and then the rest of the array. So here we're just returning the head, which is 1. Fairly simple. And if I were to put in instead, oops, let me just see if I can, there we go. If I were instead putting in Billy, now the first element that was, or the first argument that was passed in is the string Billy, so that's what we get. So that's how you can use the rest and the spread operator. And down here is an example of how you can use it in actual code to do sort of a knockoff of pattern matching. So you can't actually overload functions in JavaScript, which is where you define a function multiple times. So if you like sum r with an empty array, and then that's going to be 0, and then sum r with single elements is going to be that element. You can't do that in JavaScript, so instead, what we can do is just the standard if-else statements. And so what we're checking here is if the first element does not exist, that means that there's no x and there's no xs. So if there's no first element, then there's no other elements in the array. Then we just return 0. And then we can check because the arguments that are gathered into the rest, with the rest operator, is a proper array. So it's not like the arguments object, which is an array-like object. This is an actual array. So we can call .length on it, and we can get the length of it. So if it has no length, if the length is 0, then we know we only have x, so we can return x. Otherwise, we will return, and this is some recursion. If you're not familiar with recursion, then I have a video on it. I will put a card up in the top corner and link it in the description. You can check that out. But we are recursively calling the first element plus then the same function called again, sum r, with, again, all the arguments in the rest of the array, all the rest of the arguments spread out and passed in to sum r. So I'm using this excessively here, the rest and spread operators, just to show you lots of examples. But if we start from the call site, we start with the nums array. So 1, 2, and so on. And then we're spreading it out into its individual elements so that instead of calling just nums, or instead of passing in nums, we're passing in 1, 2, 3, etc., etc. Which means up here, the x will become 1, and xs becomes an array of everything from 2, 3, 4, up to 10. And then by the time it gets down here, xs is still that array, so then we have to spread it back out so that it looks like the call site. So then instead of it being that array of 2, 3, 4, up to 10, it's instead the individual values, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now 2 is x, and an array of 3 to 10 is xs. And it will just iterate through recursively until it gets the sum. And let's just make sure I wrote that. And if I run it, it should give me 55, and we get 55. So that's how that guy works. Next up is an example of using a special first value. So this is if we wanted to separate off the first value for some other specific reason. So in the last example, it was to allow for recursion. In this example, we're using it to apply that first value to the rest of the elements in the array. So what I've got here, oops, I keep lifting my hand and then putting it down in the wrong spot on the keyboard. There we go. I'm calling profile, which is my function here, with person spread apart. So instead of passing in the array of these elements, I'm passing in those individual elements as the arguments into the profile function. It will grab out the first element, he likes, as the variable prefix, and it will gather the rest of the elements in the array into the rest of the arguments, into an array called nouns with the rest operator. We can then map over the nouns array because, like I said, it's not an array-like object, it's a proper array. Each noun, we will just apply the prefix. So if I run this, array of he likes dogs, he likes blue, and he likes fajitas. So that's a neat little way to use it. Next up, this is my final example. I combine everything we've done so far and try to go absolutely crazy with all of the rest and spread operators. So again, we're using a special first element, but I am also just going absolutely crazy and introducing the use of the spread operator in an array literal. So we haven't seen this up to this point. In every other one, it was used in either a function call site or the parameter list, what I'm doing here is taking nums and I'm spreading out the values into individual elements. And that way, instead of this being an array that looks something like, and then the nums array, so like 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., and then 11, 12, 13. Instead, they're just all flattened out. So we have 1, 2, 3, all the way up until we get to 13. So this is a useful way to concatenate arrays because it's essentially the same as if I had called nums.concat and then passed in 11, 12, and 13. Or done .push or something similar. And so what we have in this example is I'm taking an array that I'm calling table array, or table R, and these are, you can imagine a table in an Excel spreadsheet. So the entire array, the outer array is the table, and each subarray is a column. And what I want to do is make sure that all of the columns are at least as long as column 1. So I have column 1, column 2, column 3, and column 4. Down here, I'm passing in table array spread, so that instead of passing in the entire array, I'm passing in each individual column. That means I can then grab out column 1, gather the rest of the columns up into an array that I'm going to call table with the rest operator. And in here, I have a helper function called addEmpty. And this function is going to be used as a function, a transform function when passed to map. It's just going to check if the current column that we are looking at has the same length, or sorry, is at least as long as column 1. And if it's not, if it's less than the length of column 1, then it's going to append a 0 to the end of that column and recursively call it, adding zeros each time until it is at least as long, at which point it will just return the column. And this is an example of how you can use the spread operator to concatenate lists. So instead of calling call.concat with 0 or doing a .push, something like that, I can write a array literal and just pass in the column array, have it spread out, and then just put comma, and then whatever values I want to append to it. Same thing down here. When I'm actually calling the return value or creating the return value, I'm passing column 1 into the returned array because we want to create a new table R. So this outer array becomes table R. Obviously, column 1 is not being touched because everything should be taken in accordance with whether it is at least as long as column 1 or not. And I know column 1 is already as long as column 1, so I don't need to check it. And then the rest of the columns, which I'm calling table, will be spread out after they are mapped over with addEmpty. So they'll all be the same length. And that's what we get. So we get all of the other columns have a bunch of zeros added just to make sure that they are all just as long as column 1. So this is absolute bonkers code. You probably would never, I shouldn't say probably would never, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You probably would not want to use this many rest and spread operators, but when it makes sense, hopefully this example showed you a number of different use cases when you could reach for this sort of thing, and you would find it as a way to clean up, a good way to clean up some of your code. So hope you learned something. If you're not familiar with the rest and spread operators and maybe you're still confused, let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear if there's anything you want me to cover in the future, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.